This is an irresponsible amount of batter for this bowl size. I just want people to know that. If Chris Morocco were here, he would be horrified. Chris is all about use the right tool and everything. Hi everyone, I'm Claire, and this is episode 1 of BA's Baking School. We are showing you everything you need to know about layer cakes, from the cakes themselves, to the fillings, to the frostings, putting the whole thing together, decorating in a 5-episode series. And by the time you watch, you should know everything there is to know about how to make a layer cake at home, whether it's your very first and you're a novice baker, or you're more experienced and just want to get better. Over the course of the series, we're going to be making 3 specific layer cakes to demonstrate these universal techniques, and here are those cakes. So here I have our 3 individual layer cakes. A layer cake is a construction of multiple layers of a sponge separated by a filling, and then the whole thing is iced and decorated. Let me break down each of the cakes and how they're different. Cake number 1 is our birthday cake. It is composed of 3 layers of classic yellow cake. The layers are soaked in a vanilla milk. The filling is a whipped chocolate ganache. The frosting is chocolate Swiss meringue buttercream, and the decor is rainbow sprinkles pressed around the sides. But if someone made this cake for me on my birthday, I would cry. It would be so touched. For our coconut cake, here's what we got. 6 layers of white cake, coconut milk soak. In between the layers, coconut caramel. Outside and on the top, we piped Italian meringue, torched, and then toasted coconut on top. It might look intimidating, but you really can make this at home. So you just have to watch all 5 episodes. Just get comfortable. Our third cake is our carrot cake. It's enormous. We have 3 layers of carrot cake with walnuts. The filling is very thin layers of pineapple vanilla compote. Then in between the layers and around the sides and top, classic cream cheese frosting. The decorations are candied carrot ribbons. They're not supposed to be this big. I made a mistake and then we couldn't reshoot it. I did some bad math. Sorry. Episode 1 is all about the cakes themselves. How to mix the batters, the different recipes, all you need to know about the cakes that go inside of our final composed layer cakes. So to make the layers for any kind of layer cake, there are essential tools that you must have. A large whisk, heat-proof spatula, liquid measuring cups, dry measures, mixing bowls, at least 2 light-colored identical cake pans. These are 9-inch. Parchment paper and scissors for cutting out rounds. Non-stick cooking spray. And a stand mixer. I really don't recommend making a layer cake by hand. Stand mixer will make it so much easier. So the first thing you have to do always before starting to build your batter is line your cake pans. And that's because a layer of parchment on the bottom ensures that your cake releases when you turn it out. I'm just tracing around the very bottom of the pan with a pen. You can use a Sharpie. I'm going to trace the second one right next to it. And now I have the outline of the pan. You have another pan like this, Rhoda? Because this one doesn't actually fit in the bottom of this pan because they're not the same size. These 2 fit nicely in the bottom. I'm going to use a little bit of non-stick cooking spray to coat the pans. And now I line the parchment in the bottom. Sometimes I like to fold it in half like this, so that helps to eliminate air bubbles as I place the parchment in the pan. Another light coating of spray on the parchment itself. To really ensure that the cakes don't stick, I dust everything with a layer of flour. Now I tap the flour while rotating the pan all the way around so that it coats not only the bottom but the sides. Any cake that you bake in here will slide right out. If you were to skip this step, it could lead to disastrous consequences. It's time to find out what would happen if we didn't prep our baking pan. This is just a batch of our regular yellow cake. So I'm going to scrape in no parchment, no butter, no flour, not even a spray of Pam. So I'll bake this for the regular time, about a half an hour, and we'll see what happens. Okay, here is that cake layer that's cooled. A little worried. There's no parchment, so there's nothing that's creating any kind of release on the bottom. It's pretty stuck. All right, this guy, it has to come out in pieces, unfortunately. It's like in Arrested Development, and that's why you always prep the pan. Disaster otherwise. So now that the pans are prepped, we're ready to move on to the batter. I'm going to show you 3 distinct cake recipes using 3 distinct methods for mixing. Each of our 3 cakes has a different texture, and that's because of the way the different ingredients are mixed together that produces different amounts of gluten. So I'm going to show you what gluten looks like. Gluten is produced when the proteins in wheat flour interact with water. Different amounts of gluten development affects the overall texture. When water comes into contact with wheat flour, two proteins, glutenin and gliadin, produce what's called gluten, and it's these long, stretchy strands that give bread dough, for instance, their chewy texture. The more I mix this, the more structure I'm giving it. That's what we want in bread dough, not what we want in cake batter. Here I have two examples of baked goods with different amounts of gluten development so I can show you what the final result is. First I have, it's really like a muffin. I mean, let's be honest, a muffin is cake. Just for anyone that doesn't know that. It's kind of why I don't like muffins, I'd just rather eat cake. So this is an example of lower gluten development. The texture is light and fluffy. Unlike cake, the object when you're making bread is often to develop as much gluten as possible. When I press down and it springs back up, that's because of all that gluten. It's super springy, very chewy. I can see little flecks of the whole grain in it. By changing around the order and method of mixing together the batter, we can change the amount of gluten development. There's more than one way to bake a cake, so I'm going to show you the 3 different mixing methods for each of our 3-layer cakes. Cake number 1 is our birthday cake. Very classic yellow cake. For our coconut cake, we got 6 layers of white cake. Our third cake is our carrot cake. We have 3 layers of carrot cake with walnuts. These are the 3 different cakes that we're going to make. We're ready to start building our first classic yellow cake, and we're going to use the traditional method for bringing the cake together, which starts with creaming the butter and sugar. And this is going to result in a nice fluffy cake with sort of a beautiful domed lid and a very nice texture. Here are all the ingredients you need to make classic yellow cake using the traditional creaming method. Granulated sugar, unsalted butter, large eggs, buttermilk, vegetable oil, vanilla extract, baking powder, kosher salt, baking soda, and cake flour. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is combine all my dry ingredients, but I am using a whisk to combine dry, and this is also going to eliminate any lumps that could form pockets of flour in the batter. So I'm just combining all these wet together in with the buttermilk. Yellow cake is so named because it has a really large amount of egg yolks in it, and the yolks contribute a nice sort of golden hue to the cake. So yellow cake equals egg yolks. So I'm using 11 yolks and just 1 whole egg. So this is my 11th yolk. And then the last egg is just a whole. How did I screw up cracking the whole egg? Okay, so the general order of operations is butter and sugar go in first. We want to work a lot of air into that, and then we add eggs, followed by wet ingredients and dry ingredients alternating, beginning and ending with dry. All right, I shut the mixer off as soon as those last streaks of flour disappeared, because if I kept mixing, I would be at risk of overdeveloping the gluten, which would be very, very bad for our cake. What would happen if there is the problem of overworking your batter? I have that same yellow cake batter that I'm going to just continue to beat in the mixer. All right, I think that's enough. I can tell that it's overmixed because the texture of the batter is droopy. You can see how stretchy the batter is, which is an indication of gluten. Okay, so I'm going to put this into the pan, into the oven, 30 minutes, and see what happens. All right, it has dramatically shrunk away from the edges. As the cake bakes, the gluten strands kind of like snap together and contract, so you get that shrinking. Well, the crumb almost has sort of like a bready consistency, and I can tell that it has sort of a tough texture. But it's definitely chewy, not what we're going for in a layer cake. On the other end of the spectrum, what happens if you undermix your batter? I have yellow cake batter with just the very last bit of flour added. You can see there's a little bit of flour still visible. Hardly any gluten has been developed at all, but we're gonna bake it for 30 minutes and see what happens. Here is that cake layer. Right away, big dip in the center, so it's sunk quite a bit. That is because there isn't enough gluten structure to support the weight of the cake. Oh wow, so you can see much more open crumb, super, super crumbly. It almost like turns back into batter when you eat it. The key to mixing your batter when you're making cake is make sure all the flour is in there. Mixed by hand at the end is really useful to make sure it's well mixed and everything is incorporated, but don't go any further than that. That will give you the best result in the final texture of the cake. So now I want to work it a couple times with a spatula by hand to just make sure that the stuff that's at the bottom mixes evenly with the stuff that's at the top. I have my kitchen scale here. I'm going to use it to weigh out the batter to ensure that I have exact amounts equal between the three. So each one is 750 grams. And now I have a small offset spatula, a tool which you will find indispensable for layer cake making. And I'm going to use this to level out the batter and also work it into the sides so that there's no air pockets around those corners. We're going to bake these cakes at 350. So I'm going to start with 2 in the upper position, far to the sides, and then 1 in the middle. And the idea is to prevent the 2 on the top from blocking heat to the bottom. I'm also going to rotate them a little more than halfway through baking. So here's what we did for mixing cake batter using the traditional creaming method. We started by beating together the butter and sugar until very light and fluffy. Then we beat in the eggs, followed by the dry ingredients and the wet ingredients that we added alternating, starting and ending with dry. Then we scraped the batter into the prepared cake pans, dividing evenly and weighing to guarantee perfectly even layers. I smoothed them with an offset spatula and we put them in the racks of the oven preheated to 350 on the upper third and lower third to bake until done. Now I'm going to put together the white cake batter and I'm going to show you the technique that's called reverse creaming. It produces a cake with a very fine crumb and also a really flat top. And here's what you need for classic white cake. Cake flour, granulated sugar, baking powder, kosher salt, baking soda, unsalted butter, buttermilk, vegetable oil, large eggs, vanilla extract, and almond extract. So it's called reverse creaming because you don't start with the butter and sugar, you actually start with all the dry ingredients in the bowl first, and then you work in the fat. So I'm combining all the dry ingredients in the stand mixer bowl plus my sugar. So I'm going to plug my dry ingredients into the mixer. And now I have room temperature butter here. In the traditional creaming method for the yellow cake, we didn't add the flour until the very end, and now we're starting with all the dry ingredients here and adding the butter directly to it. So this will seem really counterintuitive for a lot of cake makers out there, but it's a wonderful method. It works really well. What I'm doing here is I am working the butter into the dry mixture so that the fat in the butter is coating the flour, and that is going to inhibit gluten formation when I add the liquid ingredients. A little bit of vegetable oil. I like to add almond extract to white cake because it's sort of a classic touch, and also some vanilla extract. I'm just going to whisk these together. Okay, I'm going to add about half of the buttermilk. This is going to start to build a little bit of structure in the cake. Good. So I'm going to let this mix pretty well. So now I'm ready to add my egg mixture, and I'm going to do it in 2 additions. Now the batter is fully mixed, all the ingredients are added. Because there's so little gluten that we've formed so far, we actually have to work the batter quite a bit, and this is our chance to work some air into it because we don't have that part where we cream the butter and sugar. So I'm going to let it go on medium-high for a good 2 minutes, and this also will help incorporate some air into the batter to lighten it. Okay, now I'm ready to divide my batter into my pans. These go into the same 350 oven, same orientation of the pans. So here's how we put together the white cake batter using the reverse creaming method. We started by combining all the dry ingredients plus sugar in the bowl of the mixer, whisked that to combine. Then I added all the butter and worked that in with the paddle, added all the buttermilk and a little bit of vegetable oil, worked that into a batter, then added the eggs whisked together with the extracts into a liquid. I added that in 2 additions and beat very well afterwards until I had a light fluffy batter. Divided that into the 3 prepared cake pans and into the 350 oven. Carrot cake is an oil-based cake. There's a different method for putting together the batter, and here are all the ingredients, and there are a lot of them. Large eggs, granulated sugar, dark brown sugar, vanilla extract, vegetable oil, all-purpose flour, cinnamon, ground ginger, freshly grated nutmeg, baking powder, kosher salt, baking soda, buttermilk, carrots, and walnuts. So our third cake today is a carrot cake, which is an oil-based cake. So very different from the yellow cake and white cake because no butter at all, and it starts with beating air into the eggs along with the sugar. So an oil-based cake tends to be a little bit denser, but also because of all the oil in there, it's also much more moist. I do like walnuts in my carrot cake, so we're going to add them today. So these will toast in like a 350 oven for 10 minutes or so until they're darkened a little bit and toasty smelling. So what I'm going to do is grate the carrots on the large holes and put them in this bowl and then combine them with the buttermilk because the buttermilk will start to tenderize the carrots. Now I want to mix together all my dry ingredients again. Okay, now I'm going to start building everything in the mixer. I'm using whole eggs, and now I'm going to beat the eggs with my sugars. I have dark brown sugar and white sugar. Because I'm not creaming together butter and sugar, my chance of incorporating air into the dough is really in this stage. And you can see that this mixture is already lightening quite a bit. And now I'm ready to do a crucial step in oil-based cake, which is emulsifying the oil into the eggs and sugar. So this just means that I am combining the eggs and oil so that they thicken. Basically, the oil will disappear into the eggs. So I'm going to turn this on medium and stream in the oil very slowly. I don't want to overwhelm the eggs with oil, so I'm just going to take it pretty slow. So you'll notice that there's no oil that's like sitting on top or that's separated. It's all incorporated into the eggs. Now I want to switch to the paddle. So I'm going to add about a third of my dry with the mixer on very, very low, half of the carrot mixture. This bowl is definitely going to overflow. I'm really nervous. Okay, you know what I have to do? At this point I have to switch to doing it by hand. This is an irresponsible amount of batter for this bowl size. I just want people to know that. I usually forget at this stage to add the walnuts, but I'm not going to forget, so I'm going to do that. I think mixing by hand at the end is always a good idea. It's going to be, this thing weighs a ton. It's going to be a lot of batter. So into the same oven. These will take a little while also because denser batter, a lot more moisture, longer to bake. So for our oil-based cake, we started by whipping the eggs and sugar in the stand mixer with the whisk attachment until very light and foamy. Then I emulsified in the oil, adding it very slowly so that I didn't overwhelm the egg mixture. Then we added our dry ingredients, alternating with our wet, including our carrots, starting and ending with dry, and then I folded in the walnuts, divided into the pans, and baked it in the oven. I want to talk now about doneness indicators, so how to know when your cake is ready to come out of the oven. Here I have 3 examples of cakes, all at various stages of baking. So I have one that's perfectly done, one that's underdone, and one that's overdone. For this yellow cake that's underdone, when I put in my cake tester and pull it out, you can see that it still has batter that's clinging to it. The cake is basically still raw or semi-raw in the center. You'll notice that as it cools, it's going to sink because the eggs have not fully cooked in the cake and there hasn't been that like souffling action. And when I cut into it, there'll still be some raw uncooked batter in there. This cake, on the other hand, gets overbaked. You can see it's quite a bit darker on the surface. It's very hard, and the interior is going to be completely dry. This cake is just right. So nice, even golden color. A cake tester inserted into the very center, comes out clean. This cake should be nice and tender in the middle, but fully baked. Okay, so to recap, take a look at it. It should have a nice, even golden color all across the surface, including the center. Touch, it should spring back when you poke at the center. Cake tester will come out clean. And also smell. It'll smell like incredible birthday cake scent in your kitchen when the cake is approaching doneness. A cake that's properly baked should taste good without any frosting at all.
What do we got?
Are you rolling?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, these are done. One of them sunk a little bit because I took it out too early. So even I make mistakes all the time. This is a layer from the carrot cake that we made. I'm going to show you how to unmold a layer from the pan. Provided that you've lined your cake pan properly, all you have to do to unmold the layer is cut around the sides with a thin blade or an offset spatula, invert the rack onto the pan, flip the whole thing over, give it a nice sharp tap on the counter, remove the pan, and peel back the parchment. All right, now it's time to do some tasting. I have all the cakes side by side, carrot, white, and yellow. And we're going to take a look at what the interiors look like and the differences in sort of the crumb and texture overall based on the different mixing methods and ingredients. So first I want to talk about the obvious visual differences. Yellow cake versus white cake. This has a much more golden hue to it because of all the yolks. This one was just egg whites. Both the yellow and white cakes have sort of more openness as opposed to the carrot cake, which is weighed down not only by the oil but by all the stuff that's folded into it as well. The texture of the white cake, the slightest pressure kind of dissolves into crumbs, so it's really, really tender. Reverse creaming means that you develop overall, I think, less gluten, so less bounciness, more tenderness, as opposed to the yellow cake, which has a little bit more structure to it, but still a really tender crumb. This carrot cake definitely is a little like heftier, really moist, much less prone to sort of crumbling. All of them are good for layer cakes because they resist drying out pretty well. Do you want to try these? Yeah. I want to walk you through each one. Wait, hold on. I just need you to pretend like they're not dry. They're dry. The flavor's still good. They've been sitting out for a little while. So yellow cake, white cake, carrot cake are 3 different kinds. I'll take a little nibbles.
Very classic.
Yeah. To me, it's like
Birthday cake.
birthday cake. Yeah.
Yeah. This is nice in its lightness.
Yeah, definitely.
I like the almond flavor.
Hmm.
Yummy flavor.
How much do you love cake?
We love cake.
I doubled the batter in the bowl.
How much carrot is in this?
I don't remember.
Cool. It's not that sweet. The thought being that you're going to have cream cheese frosting on top.
Yeah,
Just, like,
has to be
always
cream
over
cheese
the top.
frosting. The goal with these, in terms of flavor, was like not to overwhelm with sugar because
It's
you
coming
always
later
need
on.
something to balance out. Yeah.
Totally. I feel I learned a lot today.
Thanks, Molly. I think the main takeaway about cake today is that it's a lot of work, but as long as you follow the rules, you get such a wonderful, versatile result. Keep watching so you can see how we not only put together all the other components, but then also build our final layer cakes in the end. So don't go anywhere.